The main trailer for Dragon's Dogma 2 just dropped along with a release date and further details for a gameplay showcase. What I'll be doing in today's video is calling out additional details you may have missed in the trailer and some things that are new to Dragon's Dogma 2 as opposed to Dragon's Dogma 1. Please be aware that this trailer breakdown will also include spoilers for Dragon's Dogma 1, as this trailer in particular is very story heavy, so without further ado, let's get started. One of the very first shots we see is a familiar scenario where the Arisen is surrounded by goblins, but this parry into counterattack is a bit new. This specific arcing attack after a perfect block isn't exactly something we've seen in Dragon's Dogma 1 before, so this will be a new thing for the fighter vocation in Dragon's Dogma 2. The closest thing I could compare it to would be the one-handed sword skill from the assassin vocation in Dragon's Dogma 1 called Clarity, which is where you hold your one-handed blade in weight, deflecting and seamlessly countering enemy attacks. Clearly that's not what this attack is here, but it should be mentioned that there is something similar in Dragon's Dogma 1. Now, just before we get that clip there, we also see that the Arisen is greeted by this pawn here, and they actually lead them to the Riftstones. This portion of the trailer seems like it would be the intro to pawns and the Riftstone in general, as the Arisen isn't really holding or equipping any armor or any weapons, and it seems like this is their first time at a Riftstone. Next we see this female character, and if you look closely, you actually notice that she is an elf. Now, one thing I didn't mention in the intro that we'll be talking about today is that the website for Dragon's Dogma 2 is actually updated to include more characters and also more information about vocations that we'll go over later. This character in particular is called Dorian. She is indeed an elf that is the sister of another character we'll meet much later on, and she is a quiet and reserved, refined young woman. She doesn't actually speak English very well, but she is very fluent in Elvish, obviously, and there will be more details on that later. By the way, I'm not just glossing over the fact that there are literal elves in Dragon's Dogma 2, which we know was a cut feature from Dragon's Dogma 1. You could customize your own character with elf ears, but there weren't really any significant things to be added to that. However, as we see here, clearly elves are going to play a much bigger role in Dragon's Dogma 2. Additionally, cheating forward a little bit, you can actually customize your character in Dragon's Dogma 2 with elf ears again, but it doesn't seem to affect gameplay that much. The same could be said if you choose to make yourself a beastren as well. We'll dive into character creation a little bit later. Back to the order of clips here. The next clip we have is reminiscent of Living Armor. This is actually a new monster that's explained later called a Doulahan. It's very similar to Living Armor in looks and feel, although it's slightly different, and we'll go over that a little bit later when we have the full gameplay showcase for this new monster. The very next clip shows a magic archer aiming at what seems like a Garm, which is this giant dog-looking thing from Dragon's Dogma 1. This is actually kind of cool, as Garms were exclusive to Bitter Black Isle, which was the DLC for Dragon's Dogma Dark Arisen, and now it seems like they'll be in the main game of Dragon's Dogma 2, which means that we might get these more advanced monsters here earlier in the gameplay of Dragon's Dogma 2. It should also be noted again that Dragon's Dogma 2 is 4 times larger than what it was in Dragon's Dogma 1 as far as landmass goes, so there's plenty of places to place these more advanced monsters, and with a bigger story, I'm sure we'll have plenty of opportunities to see more of these tougher monsters. Of course, we also see the Gorgon here in the very next shot, and interesting to note, we don't actually get a clip of anybody actually looking at the Gorgon eyes, which is usually what would turn people to stone, so this might just be an area of effect thing that happens, or this could potentially be locked to a cutscene as well. The next clip shows this black character here, and we don't really know anything about him. There isn't even an entry for him on the website, although he seems kind of important. If you've ever played Baldur's Gate 3, he's giving me Will vibes. A few frames later, we'll also see Wilhelmina. She was shown in the first trailer as well, and her entry on the website seems to indicate that she's the proprietress of Rose Chateau, which, if you don't know, a chateau is a large French settlement, usually a large house or mansion, and there's usually wines named after that local location. Seems like she spends a lot of time around nobility, and she's rather enigmatic, possessing high intelligence and charm. If you're familiar with the Witcher universe, it seems like they're setting her up to be more of a Yennefer type figure, although there isn't any magic involved from what we can see. Don't really know anything about this next guy, but the very next lady we see is actually Queen Disa. She also has an entry on the website, and this is actually very interesting. By the way, you may have noticed that I'm kind of skipping around the trailer because you should definitely just go watch it yourself. I'll include a link in the description, but at the very beginning, we do have a first look at Brant seemingly introing the current sovereign. Interestingly, her character entry on the website says that she was queen to that previous sovereign, or just the previous sovereign. Doesn't say if it's that one, but I would imagine there's an empty throne out here, and she took charge of the kingdom's government after his death. So what that tells me is that the sovereign entering the castle that we actually don't see any more of, he seems out of the picture, and I do not really know where where this happens in the timeline, although we do have a memory from previous gameplay of the Arisen fighting the dragon in a city called Melv. By the way, this is the same battle where we meet Ulrika. And if you've been keeping up with everything we know about Dragon's Dogma 2, by the way, you should definitely go watch that video. A bit outdated, but still a lot of good information. She actually nurses us back to health after we're pretty much burned to death by the dragon and made Arisen. But anyway, the main point I'm making right here is that this town seems a little bit small, and yet there's such a large battalion of soldiers that we see that are fighting the dragon. Now, I'm not sure about the significance of this many soldiers being around whenever the dragon attacks or anything like that, or if the Sovereign is involved, but either way, the Sovereign is out of the picture. I do not know if the death was caused by the dragon or if he was just old or how he died, but something is telling me that it has to do with the attack at Melv, but that's completely my speculation. I just wanted to go off there for a bit. Anyway, she's planning to install Sven as the next Sovereign, which is this little guy here. He also has a character entry saying that, of course, he's the son of the Queen Regent Disa and a candidate to become the next console ruler. Basically, he knows that his mom is scheming and he doesn't want anything to do with that. He's more focused on what's right. So it's a very moral character and has kind of a boyish naivete and is more of a prince figure. So if I had to put my money on it, he'll probably be one of the first people that we meet that will be willing to give aid to the Arisen. Speaking of that, and while my brain's still haphazardly jumping from one character to the other, let's go ahead and cover Brant, who is a honest and righteous captain of the Palace Guard. He was recently demoted for opposing the Queen Regent when she came into power, and he is primarily concerned for the best interests of Vermund, and he is another one of these never do wrong characters, similar to Sven. So he'll probably be aiding us as well. All right, kind of skipped over one little clip here of the false Arisen that we see, who has a wake stone in his chest. There is a comment made later on in the showcase about how this character, being a false Arisen, is able to command pawns. As you can see in the wider shot here, he does have 3 pawns who are backing him up. Now, jumping over to Queen Disa one more time, it is well known that she's trying to create a false Arisen plot to sort of usurp everything, you know, maintain power, corrupt individuals, that sort of thing. So I think this guy will be related to her, but I also want to call attention to the wake stone here. You can see it visibly beating in his chest, and I can't help but think that this has something to do with why he's able to command pawns. Now, wake stones in general gameplay are used to resurrect yourself whenever you die. However, one thing we don't know is what significance they're going to play in the story as a plot point or as a plot device. Now, we know that simply possessing a wake stone in your inventory doesn't really do much, but this character in particular seems to have the wake stone embedded in his chest. I don't know if that arrangement specifically would give a character powers similar to the Arisen, as in powers to command pawns, if that's the cause for it, or if it's affecting it in any way. But either way, we're getting more lore about wake stones, I would imagine, so I am kind of excited to see what happens with that. And to that point, there are a lot of things in Dragon's Dogma 1 that aren't really explained a whole lot, but maybe we'll get some more information on these things in Dragon's Dogma 2. All right, next shot we see is a thief fighting a Minotaur, which is a new monster to Dragon's Dogma 2. And all I gotta say here is that I slowed down this clip, and I think we're seeing what is the new version of Masterful Kill from the Assassin Vocation. This is a counterattack skill that whenever a monster attacks you during the window here, you're able to then hop on its back, slit its throat, do all that sort of stuff. But this one appears to be sort of a downward stroke. Very cool looking move, and another indicator that we might not be getting an assassin vocation per se, but a lot of the mechanics here seem to be distributed among the thief and archer class, and maybe another hybrid class, but that's not been revealed yet. Another random detail that I noticed is that this thief doesn't seem to have any characters around him. There's no pawns or anything. And here's the thing, they have armor and weapons, which tells me that it's after the character in the story would have been introduced to Riftstone, so I'm wondering if Thief is going to have any solo augments that would boost skills or damage or anything like that, similar to how the assassin class had in Dragon's Dogma 1. I can almost guarantee that this is me overthinking a trailer clip, but maybe not. By the way, this is Ulrika again, in case you missed her. Next clip, we see the new version of Maelstrom, which looks very cool. And we see the Sphinx smiling at the Arisen again. Now, in all the clips we've seen of the Sphinx, we don't actually see a fight breaking out. There's always this little smile that happens. I imagine we'll probably fight one at some point, but I'd like to call attention to, in mythology, the Sphinx is known for giving riddles. So I don't know if that would play a factor into Dragon's Dogma 2, although, you know, it's possible. I'm just saying, you've never seen a Sphinx in a fight at the same time. You just don't know. All right, this next clip is pretty cool. It's an additional attack that we see Mystic Spear Hand get. Seems to be a vertical spinning slash attack, but the interesting thing here is that he actually makes a clone of himself, which means that we have double attacks going on here. And I'm not trying to overhype the class or anything like that, but I'm just saying the way that he darts around and does executions and has a mystic clone of himself while he attacks, it's a pretty cool looking class, I can't lie. So please inject this Mystic Spearhand propaganda into your veins because I'm all for it. Next clip, we see the first look at Talos, which is this large golem looking thing, and I'll include some clips from the later showcase here as well. The entire fight with this thing seems to be a part of the story or a plot. It doesn't seem like you'll encounter this out in the wild. He comes up from the sea and has these weak points all over the place. You'll have to climb on him and attack these weak points to slow him down and defeat him, I'm sure. A clip from the showcase as well shows that ballistas are making a return, which is very fitting for this fight. And we eventually catch up to Talos launching a spear at what looks to be a fortified bridge. Now, one little concern that I have, and maybe this is just the trailer showing something unfinished, but I do notice that this spear clips into the bridge quite a ways before the actual animation of the explosion happens. And there are little things here and there that I do hope get cleaned up before the final version comes out. This one I just happen to notice as it's pretty egregious. Also, apparently this dude has like 10 million gallons of fluid that come out of these weak spots, which I don't know how there's that much, but you can see for yourself it's a lot. So closing thoughts, it looks like a story scripted type of event and looks like it's going to be a pretty fun fight. Hopefully the nitty gritty gets cleaned up a little bit. The next clip we get of Grigori here, and he actually makes a statement here asking to show him the path that we as the Arisen would walk. In the very next shot we see a throne. Now spoilers here for Dragon's Dogma 1. I don't know if this is an actual reference for the Dragon's Dogma 1 choice where before you fight the dragon you have a chance to make a deal with him and you end up becoming Duke of Grand Soren, and that's considered a bad ending. So I don't know if this is a reference to taking a throne and getting a bad ending, or if this is actually the goal this time around to become the ruler of Vermund. Could also be a meaningless shot that then ends up being a plot twist later, but I figured I'd mention it. And finally, after the title shot, we get a returning character coming back. Is one of my favorites. It's the Dragon Forge. Look at him. You can tell because he's got that white robe, he's got the rings around his hands, he's got the burnt arms, and for the most part, his dungeon looks almost exactly the same as it does in Dragon's Dogma 1. Basically, he is a character that will impart knowledge of the dragon and the fight and the universe and all that sort of thing to you as the current Arisen, so he's a very cool character and I'm glad to see him make a return. And by the way, the game's coming out March 22nd, 2024. The leaks were real. I was wrong. My pipe dream is not true, and we will be waiting just a few more months before the game comes out. So that's the end of the main trailer, and you may have noticed if you're following along with the trailer that I did skip a few clips, but we'll go back over them now as we have more details from the rest of the showcase. First things first, we get to mention that this world, Dragon's Dogma 2 with Vermund and Batal, is known as a parallel world, or if you might say a parallel universe. It's a well-known lore concept from Dragon's Dogma 1 that these are parallel worlds that are almost stacked on top of each other, that the Seneschal oversees and provides the will for everything to live. It's kind of spoiler territory. I would recommend just playing the first game to get a little bit more detail on it. But anyway, parallel world. Next, we'll cover the Batal situation. We do meet up with two characters that are mentioned on the website here. First, I'll talk about this priestess character. This is Priestess Nadinia, who is actually the Empress of Batal. She was basically groomed to be a royal from a very early age. She became the head of her nation at a very young age, and she's earned the trust of her people thanks to her kindness and desire for peace. People of Batal worship what's known as the lambent flame, and they have the belief that pawns are the source of all evil, so I can imagine that being the Arisen, you'll get some kindness, but there might be some suspicion of your party if you happen to have pawns nearby, considering that they have this belief in their culture that pawns are the root of all evil, so to speak. This other character that we've seen in a previous trailer that I previously thought was Nadinia, but is actually a different character, is called Manella. She is actually the guard of the Lambent Flame, or rather she leads them, and she protects the High Priestess and her acolytes, treats all her people equally, and strives for equality between the races, that being human and beastren. She's another one of these morally good characters who is striving to be more righteous. There's plenty of those in this game, and I imagine there'll be many more to come. And while we're on the topic of characters and quests and all that, let's go ahead and jump to the Elven section here. We initially meet up with Glenweir, who seems like he would be a Legolas lookalike, but he actually struggles skills with archery given his entry in the website. He is also the brother of this character here who we saw in the main trailer, and it is her we have to rescue in the quest at this showcase. Unlike most elves, he is very fluent in human language, and he is more of a gentle and timid spirit, which is not very common among the elven people apparently. To continue with the quest, we end up following him all the way back to the land of the elves, which seems to be this wooded area. We meet up with some of their leadership, and then we go rescue his sister along with his father, it seems. Well, it is shown here that you do end up saving the sister Dorian here. There isn't much more detail as far as how the quest will go. More importantly, we get a bit more information as to how Elvish speech is being translated here, and that is partly due to the fact that it seems that the character here on screen has a pawn with the specialization Woodland Wordsmith. This is actually a huge bit of information as it sheds light on what exactly an inclination and a specialization is. And as I theorized earlier in my previous video, it seems that inclination is more related to how they'll behave in battle and how they'll carry themselves in the game world, maybe even carries over to speech and that sort of thing. And it seems that specialization is going to be a specific skill that a pawn carries with them. In this case, Woodland Wordsmith allows you to speak to elves more fluently, and you can read their language while they're speaking and all that, including the subtitles, by the way. And in a following clip, we see a pawn with Logistician gathering items for the Arisen as they continue on their travels. If you've ever played a Pokemon game from Gen 3 and forward, this is similar to the pickup ability where you just randomly get items after battle. Seems to be a passive perk that will allow you to get more items as you go on your journey. So that alone is a very interesting insight there. Inclination is more of a personality trait, and specialization is what the pawn can actually do outside of battle, including language translation and also gathering items, and I'm sure much more. While not a main focus, we also get a look at what a pawn quest is here, and in this case we see Peter the pawn having a pawn quest of receive raspberry. It's not exactly known if these are all going to be basic tasks. I would assume that you would go out and gather a raspberry or buy one, and as a reward you get 2 cranberries. So this one in particular doesn't seem like it's of much significance, but you know, maybe there are some in the future that we'll see that have more significance or give you better items for that matter. Also, we see this thing called pawn badges. I'm not really sure what that is. It could be knowledge of monsters that you've defeated. It could be achievements that the pawn gets themselves. Maybe it gives the Arisen more experience or more rewards or something like that. I'm not really sure, but figured I'd point it out since it's here. Next, we get a glimpse of character creation, which I did mention earlier. It seems that we'll be able to change the ears, and I want to take a big look at this menu right here because it has a lot of info that we can use. First of all, I just want to mention that this is a lot of details to go over from the head section alone, and each of these little tabs also has very specific sliders that you can edit as well, meaning that there's a wide variety of customizations you can come up with. And as was mentioned in previous trailers and also carried over from Dragon's Dogma 1, you'll be able to customize both your main Arisen and also a pawn. Also, you may notice right here that there is an icon for weight, meaning that we'll be able to customize the Arisen's weight, and any changes that we make to the body type of the Arisen will be carried over in weight. Now in Dragon's Dogma 1, weight drastically affected stamina and also carrying capacity. I would imagine height would also affect movement speed and different sorts of athleticism, that sort of thing. So it seems that all the goodness from the Dragon's Dogma 1 customization is coming right back in Dragon's Dogma 2, which is very cool to see. By the way, there's also this addition here of having preset faces. I know that previously in Dragon's Dogma 1 you could do preset faces and then adjust sliders. However, it seems that they're giving you examples of different characters you can create and then build off of, which personally I find is very handy because I am not very good at creating characters from scratch, and this will definitely help me in my efforts. Alright, this next section that we have going over is going to preview the Trickster vocation, which is brand new to Dragon's Dogma 2, and we'll get into why it's a little bit different here. Now, as we can see from the clips that are shown here in the main showcase, we do have what looks to be an illusionist class and seems to be a full support. I want to absolutely stress this point here. There is no point in this showcase where it shows the Censor class or the Trickster actually doing direct damage. Everything for the Censor is centered around crowd control and buffing your allies from what we can see. The first ability that we're shown here is an illusion created by the Trickster, which acts as a sort of aggro draw. Everybody de-aggros from the Arisen and then goes to attack the apparition that is then created. Obviously, being able to divert aggro is a very useful tool, and I'm sure it'll see a lot of use if you do end up going with the Trickster vocation. By the way, it should also be mentioned that this is exclusive to the Arisen. None of your pawns can use Trickster. There's also an ability here where the Arisen marks another monster and the other monsters seem to attack it out of nowhere. So not only can you divert aggro away from other characters, you can actually target a monster for aggro to then be targeted to from other monsters. You can also see the Arisen buffing the different pawns, and by the way, this is a limited time ability that will allow you to exceed previous limitations of buffing pawns, which is nice. We also see the Trickster perform an apparition of what seems like a drake, and we also see them create walls, and in a previous trailer we saw them create bridges, which I can definitely see being useful at times. However, I'm not really sure how often I'll be playing this particular class, but I'm sure there's some support lovers out there that would love to pick this one up. Also, this might just be me overthinking it again, but I just can't help but think that this vocation is inspired from something in Batal. They seem to have this sort of priestly order going on. I could be completely wrong about that, but I'm just getting Batal vibes from this. So with that being said, I don't know if this will be a story locked vocation. There isn't any news on any vocations being story locked quite yet, but you know, it's possible. I get a lot of Batal vibes. Can't really pin why, I just do. All right, now that we've gone over what the Trickster actually is, I want to talk about the actual emblem for the Trickster vocation. Specifically, I'm going to talk about the colors here. It's purple and pink. None of these colors are actually shown in any other vocation in Dragon's Dogma 2. Usually what would happen, at least from what Dragon's Dogma left behind, is that you would have basic vocations which would have primary colors, and then you have hybrid vocations that build off of those colors, and you would have advanced vocations that would be the same color as the basic ones, but you would never have colors in a vocation that didn't seem to stem from anywhere. At least at this point in time, this is the first time that we've actually seen a vocation without any preceding colors. So we have purple and pink, which don't seem to really build off of anything, which means that it is possible that we have some really, really out there vocations. I mean, I'm talking the sky's the limit. Use your imagination. I have no idea where vocations are going to come from now. This is a new thing. We don't have any basis for where this vocation could have came from or anything that could be built off of in the future. This is just a really, really cool development that I did not know was going to happen. So that being said, there's been some controversy because, as we all know, I'm going to bring this up again, and I don't care if you're tired of hearing it. Mystic Knight. You see, Dragon's Dogma 1, Mystic Knight had the red and blue colors as a hybrid vocation. The red and blue colors are now taken up by Mystic Spearhand. So, that being said, this Trickster class has purple and pink, which come from seemingly nowhere, which means that there is hope. There is hope that Mystic Knight could be making a return as completely different colors. What colors would those be? I have no idea, but the possibility is there, so there is hope, my fellow Mystic Knight enjoyers. And by the way, who knows what other classes could come out? I don't know the cap of the vocations that they have, that they're currently preparing. All I know is that the more I learn about Dragon's Dogma 2, there seems to be more and more vocations popping up, and now the possibilities are endless because colors don't matter anymore. All right, now with that being said, let's move on to the warrior gameplay, which is the first official footage that we get from this, at least from a showcase perspective. So the warrior here is fighting a fire drake. Opening up this clip, we can see the grass shift right here, but this is actually caused by a roar from the warrior vocation here. This seems to be a version of war cry, which means that's making a return, and what it does is it draws aggro, which it appears to do in this clip right here. The next main attack that we see them perform looks like pommel strike, although this could be the new vocation action called barge that we've been seeing. I'm not 100% sure, but I want to say it's barge. Again, not 100%, but that's what I think it is. But the cool thing that we see later on is that the Arisen actually gets on top of the Drake later and performs an arc. Arc, of course, is short for Arc of Obliteration, but essentially they are on top of a monster, able to perform this completely separate skill, which is a new thing to Dragon's Dogma 2. I might have already mentioned it, but nevertheless, you should take note that now it looks like Arc actually has an additional sweep there at the very beginning of the attack, which means that we're getting some additional hit guarantees because this is intended, obviously, to hit stun any characters in front of you, which then clears up for the big slam there at the end. And by the way, I know that there are some warrior enjoyers in the comments here. Let me know how cool that freaking slam is. That looks beautiful. And finally, the last set of clips here is for the new enemy type Dullahan, as well as showing off a bit of the sorcerer vocation. It looks like Dullahan seems to be heavily inspired from living armor, but it is not the same thing. It seems to be a mix of living armor and some sort of headless horseman type archetype. It is holding a ghostly head in its hand along with a sword and a cape. Just overall, this thing looks awesome, by the way. But this devastating attack here, where it seems like the Arisen is drained of all stamina or drained of all energy, they don't appear to be asleep because there aren't any bubbles above their head like they were in gameplay that I've witnessed. But anyway, this seems to be a debilitating move. Clearly, they're levitated up and dealt a lot of damage from both the grab attack and the following sword strike. And then after this, we can see that a pawn is channeling High Bolide because there are 6 meteors, and the Arisen can then immediately join in. So we do know that spell syncing is back. By the way, this was a skill in Dragon's Dogma 1 that was exclusive to sorcerers, and it didn't matter where you're standing on the battlefield. I don't know if proximity to the pawn is needed in Dragon's Dogma 2. It's just shown that way in the trailer, so be aware of that. And for any additional details on spell syncing, I will link a wiki article here that covers everything you need to know from the first game. Some things could be following over to Dragon's Dogma 2 and some things could not. But overall, I'm a big fan of the Dullahan's menacing design. This thing looks amazing. And by the way, this takes place at night. I don't know if Dullahan is going to be exclusive tonight. There's no details on that as of right now. There's not even really an entry on the website either. So overall, I'm very excited to see what comes out of this particular enemy type. But anyway, one thing I will go ahead and mention is that there's a lot more information on the website now, so I'll go ahead and link it down below if I didn't mention that already. And lastly, we got some pre-order details. I'm not going to go over them. I don't really plan on getting the deluxe edition for pre-order. I think it kind of honestly ruins games. But if you want to pre-order, just go look at their Steam page or whatever you want to do. I'm not really going to cover it here. Essentially, it just gives you some extra items to make the game easier whenever you first start out, which if you're a Dragon's Dogma enjoyer like myself, I'm not going to be getting any additional handicaps, but if that's your thing, then you can check out the Steam page. And that is it, ladies and gentlemen. That is the breakdown of Dragon's Dogma main trailer along with the main showcase. Thank you guys for watching, all that stuff. Sorry it took me so long to make another video. I've been very, very busy. 2 jobs and all that, making content a little bit hard. Had to definitely dedicate some time here since yesterday and today. Today is November 29th, so glad I was able to finally get another video made. But thank you guys for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.